Okay, I've seen enough. Now I'm gonna have nightmares, for goodness sakes. Modern art is not connected to talent or the soul, but experiences. And what's funny is that people, generally on the left, will hail this as expressive and beautiful and good. But then they will look at something that actually required talent, like say creating a monstrance, and they'll call that outdated and silly. No. Welcome to the Father Leo Show, where I'm dishing out faith, culture, and commentary. And in this episode, we are going to try to figure out why modern art is so ugly. Now, not all, but a lot of it is. And we're going to jump into the reason why, and you're going to be surprised that it really has to do with spiritual things. And yes, the Catholic Church has a response. But before we jump into it, I want to encourage you to make sure you like, subscribe, share, and comment. You know how that helps us in our ability to continue to just reach other people and new audience members, as well as please consider supporting us on our Patreon community, where you get access to really great formative content, but also some special perks. So let's just jump right into it. And this all started because of this that I saw on the internet. That, to the time of this recording, has garnered over 350,000 likes. Probably millions of views, but 350,000 likes? People actually think that that is beautiful? Well, it really is because of a lack of an internal understanding of faith and spirituality. That's why let's just jump right into it with my conversation regarding art and faith. The Catholic Church, if you were to take a look historically, has been the greatest promoter and even to some degree the cause of beautiful art. I mean, we know that the Vatican Museum is one of the most prominent collection of beautiful art, and oftentimes it is considered sacred because what people believe about art, I'm just going to say it right now, is that art is connected to spirit. Art's connected to spirit. And when we get to my commentary, you're going to understand why modern art is so ugly. But in the Catholic Church, art has always been used as a form to evangelize, in order to teach. Those massive cathedrals, the statues, the paintings, the stained glass windows, all of that, as Protestants would say, is iconoclastic. You know, it's just, worthy of iconoclasm, which is the destruction of art or images of icona, image, God. But for us Catholics, it's always been an opportunity to teach. You know, I'm always so surprised whenever I bring people from the United States on a pilgrimage and into a Catholic church of prominence, or even a simple Catholic church in Europe. And they're just shocked of how beautiful it all is. In fact, the reaction that they give is awe and quiet and to be inspired by the beauty. You see, art can truly bring clarity. In a world that is full of confusion and ambiguity, art allows for a serene discussion of different interpretations of events, but also guides people in, a tradition, a clarity, a teaching. For example, whenever we look at an image of Christ on the cross, artists go through great length to make sure certain details are present. That gives us clarity. But art is also uplifting. It's actually supposed to touch something in our soul. And then again, you can see why even the Council of Trent in 1563 included a very short but rather explicit passages concerning religious images, because at that time there were great movements by Protestants to destroy sacred art. That also happened around the year 600 when Muslim invaders would enter into a church, for example, Hagia Sophia, which is now a temple and a mosque for, a mosque for Muslims to worship. But if you were to take a look, that Byzantine-style architecture was very much transformed and the art was destroyed. They don't want images of faces, unique, beautiful images of faces. Statues' heads were decapitated. I mean, you actually see a lot of that happening now. And why? Because the Catholic Church knows that art has power. And, you know, in the Council of Trent, there was a real need to kind of show and support artists. That's why in the Renaissance you see incredible and beautiful churches that everyone, even atheists, go to because it's something worth taking a selfie with that in the background. So I can say that art is truly something that has more appeal than just how it tickles your eyes. It actually creates uplifting imagination, healing, peace, all good things. And why? Because the artist is collaborating with his or her talents that God has given to that artist in order to express something beautiful. So Pope Benedict XVI repeated, not just as a cardinal, but many times as a pope, that art and the saints are the greatest apologetics for the faith. And it is true. And by the way, when we say apologetics, we're not saying we're sorry, but from the Greek understanding of apo, meaning reveal, logos, which means the word or the logic. Apologetics, art is apologetic. It's explaining something. Just take a look at the Sistine Chapel. You see all of salvation history. And then you look at that incredible image of the final judgment. And you'll see that, my goodness, it really is apologetic for the truth. And the truth is always connected to beauty, which is why I now want to jump into a conversation about why modern art is so ugly. In this cultural conversation, we just have to take a look at the premise of modern art. And modern art is really about self-expression. And this self-expression leads to a subjectivity, that everything is beautiful as long as I think that it is beautiful. This is the tyranny of relativism. Bad art is a result of relativism. Now, a child painting an image of the family in very crude images can be beautiful because of the meaning, but any artist will say, that's nothing, that's terrible. You know, but considering that it's a child, hey, it might be pretty good. What I'm frustrated to see is that modern art looks childish, just absolutely childish. And yet everyone is hailing this person who created this as some amazing person of talent. Really? Do you really honestly think that? I want to have you take a look at two images really that I just think is so important to see. And you're going to see why I'm so critical, not in a negative way, but in a very observant way, very detail-oriented way, why modern art is so ugly. Because it's a result of communism, a communist mentality. I've traveled the world enough to know that Catholics make things beautiful. And people who don't subscribe to the Catholic understanding of incarnational beauty, that God became in the flesh, and as a result, the flesh is not only redeemed, but the flesh has a purpose to make beauty that is from within. And this is what we see now. Okay, so this is, for example, the Fisherman's Wharf in Budapest, okay? This, along with, say, the Parliament, are some of the most iconic images in Hungary and around the world. Look at the detail of this beauty. And then take a look at what modern art does. This ugly, square, albeit functional, but completely uninspiring building. Modern art is unfortunately very much connected to communism, to relativism, and also to what I would call just kind of like a soulless type of living. And so I came across this video in our research, and they basically asked the question, modernism, can we build like the past? You know, when the world is turned to new forms of buildings, we have to ask why. And so this is pretty interesting. I'm going to play just a little clip for you and we'll continue our discussion.
If you have ever wondered if we can still build the beautiful buildings and neighborhoods you see in historical city centers, you are not alone. Many start to long for these types of environments, especially when they are driving through endless car-oriented suburbs or facing the bland, generic architecture of many of today's cities. What you might have seen on a holiday in Florence or Amsterdam or in some older parts of Boston looks much more enjoyable and beautiful. Maybe you think we could build like that again, but can we? And perhaps more importantly, should we?
It's a great question to ask. This video is called Why We Should Revive Traditional Architecture and Urbanism. And when we talk about modern art, we're not simply talking about a museum, although it is kind of interesting because there is a museum of actual bad art. But I'm going to tell you something. It might not be bad, it might not be a lot of talent, but it's not bad compared to some other things that I'm going to show you in a second. Check this out.
The Museum of Bad Art. Originally situated in a theater basement, the Museum of Bad Art is refreshingly devoid of good taste. The MOBA was founded by an antique dealer who showed a painting he had recovered from the trash to some of his friends. They urged him to start a collection, and that is how it all began. Today, the museum boasts a collection of over 700 pieces of art too bad to be ignored. It is the only museum of its kind dedicated to bring the good, bad art to the widest audiences. The collection consists of works of crude execution artists who are barely in control of their brush. Most of the work is donated by people who brought it in for a few dollars at a yard sale or found it in their grandparents' attic. One Canadian visitor wrote this statement in the museum's guest book. The collection is disturbing, yet I can't seem to look away, just like a hideous torrent. Although the museum's motto is...
And that's it. I think we have to recognize that ugly things can attract us in a more low-based kind of way, as opposed to true, traditional, classic art. It makes us look up, and that's a lot of work. You know, good art is really exercise for the brain. Bad art is just kind of like eating potato chips because it's just there. And the way as it describes here, you're looking at a car crash. You know, what they showed was art without a lot of technique. But I can bet you it didn't cost a lot of money to do that. But there are forms of modern art that cost a lot of money and are in incredibly central places. And it really just shows how devoid modern artists are of inspiration, of a soul, of a connection to their true calling. And this is just an example of it. This is some examples of the world's ugliest art. This is kind of funny and comical and quite sad. So we have, first and foremost, the hand face. This is actually at Christ Church in New Zealand. This is basically a hand with a face on it. It's modern art, but it is honestly, this is the stuff of nightmares, to be honest with you. Then you have in San Diego, California, Okeanos. I guess it looks like a modern thing of maybe someone kneeling or bowing, or it could look like, you know what this looks like? It looks like feces. And guess what? I bet you someone paid a lot of money to sculpt that. And then you have Santa Claus, Rotterdam in Netherlands, and it's called Just Beautiful. Honestly, this would be one of my worst nightmares, because if that, I mean, Santa Claus coming down the chimney is one thing. Seeing this come down the chimney, gosh, this is stuff that can put kids in therapy. Then you have the pig duck. This is in Turku, Finland, and it's right next to the Turkish University in Turku. Now, pig and duck are delicious. This would probably give you salmonella just by looking at it. And then you have, okay, Luxembourg, we're just going to bypass that because somehow, granted, it's a natural thing where deer do copulate, but why should that be art? That's called deer porn. And then you have in Venus, Halifax, Canada. I think we need to kind of put a blurb on this because this in of itself is so phallic, but just I mean, this reminded me of something that my dad had in his medical journals of diseases. And then number 7 in Des Moines, Iowa, again, a leaning tower of turd or something else. It's just, this is in Iowa? Come on, people. This is just sad. And then you'll get a bunch of other things. Look, the rest of these things, I don't even want to look at it because, again, I'll probably get in trouble posting things that were, quote unquote, sexual in nature. But all I'm doing is reviewing this ugly art. Thank God there are professors out there who actually are willing to say something about modern art. Listen to what he has to say. It's worthwhile listening.
And there's no way to go after this, right? Other than to have another Renaissance. Because the only way to go after this is, to nothing. To shapes. Now, shapes can be pretty. They can be smooth or rough or whatever. But what does any of this mean? Nothing. It's just shapes. Just somebody putting together something that he thought was shapy. I don't know. And I'm sure people have written dissertations, university dissertations, about what this means. It's a lot of pseudo, intellectual gibberish. Because there's nothing here. There really isn't.
Thank God he said it. He's a university professor, and he just said it. There is nothing here. Because remember that art is connected to the soul. And what we're seeing is that in a lot of people, there is confusion, there's cacophony, there's ugliness, there is anger, there's poop in themselves. But when you look at some of these artists, I think that they are almost devoid of their soul. And this is sad. And so we have to just even see, why is art even relevant? Well, I want you to take a look at this. This is really going to shock you. Okay, so there is a block of clay and a man is putting his face to it, and it's called The Rotating Mud. Is the from Yuki Tanaka's Rotating Mud piece that sold for $8.2 million. It's his last creation, a reflection on the transient nature of existence and the ever-changing landscape of human experience. Through the constant motion of the mud, the artwork embodies the passage of time, the fluidity of identity, and the cyclical nature of life. It invites viewers to contemplate the interconnectedness of all things and the beauty found in impermanences. I don't even know where to begin with this, because It is just, it's honestly sad that someone would pay $8.2 million for that. Here's what I'm going to say. When I get a lot of liberals, particularly, or non-Christian socialist people, they'll say, why don't you take Michelangelo's Pietà and sell it and then give it to the poor? It's just, it's such a thoughtless argument. Why doesn't Yuki Tanaka's takes his $8.2 million in that block of clay and make pottery so that people can cook on it and then sell all of his earnings and give that to the poor? Why not? But you have all of these people here trying so desperately to create beauty. But it is unfortunately something that is connected to the soul. Not only is it connected to the soul, it's connected to people's experiences, which is why modern art is not really about talent. It's really about experiences. And a lot of people's experiences, it's weird like this. Okay, I've seen enough. The people who work with me on this show, they provided me these things and I'm grateful for it, but now I'm going to have nightmares, for goodness sakes. But what's funny is that there's going to be a lot of very untalented people who think that because they have a degree in like art sculpture, but really they learned nothing because they just took a hammer and chisel and just broke into something and said, there's an expression of life's impermanences and how life is fluid. Okay, so again, modern art is not connected to talent or the soul, but experiences. And what's funny is that people generally on the left will hail this as expressive and beautiful and good. But then they will look at something that actually required talent, like say creating a monstrance, and then the Eucharistic host is present and nuns kneeling, chanting very similar to this, but their chant actually has meaning, and they'll call that outdated and silly. No. You can see how modern culture has taken art and turned it into a thing of relativism, ugliness, and communism. There is no doubt that the communists who have taken over a lot of the protesting, which are really riots on college campuses, they would look at these people walking around with ice cubes on their head and say, this is amazing. And then they will take a look at a building that they've basically honestly violated and basically created an insurrection by taking over a building, and they'll break stained glass windows. They will destroy statues, which really are artistic and beautiful, even if you don't agree with the meaning of the person in whose name that statue was created. At least it took talent to do. Modern art is ugly, not because there is no talent, because God gives everybody a talent. But maybe these people aren't called to be artists. Maybe they're called to be in a psychiatric ward, which is why I want to jump into my comments and my commentary to help us as Catholics get through this understanding of modernism and how it really creates ugliness. Once again, I'm not speaking as an art critique person. I like going to museums. I usually bypass the modern art because every time I go, it's usually like a big blank wall with a dot on it and a line going this way, and that sells for millions of dollars. That's not art to me. It's not even expression, and my experience of it is ultimately confusion. But again, if art is connected to people's own experiences and their own soul, that artist is simply reflecting his or her experiences, and it's ugly, it's confusing, it's boring, it's not inspiring, and honestly, it's soulless. So how are we supposed to deal with all of that? Well, let me just give you some insights, because this is something quite powerful. It's actually a little documentary on a monastery in New England. and there's an artist there, and they just basically share a little bit of their own experiences, can confirm what I've said about art so far.
Being an artist, you gotta look at the deep interior things. Okay. Why are you painting? What's your goal? And what's your interior goal? Why are you doing it? Why? I'm asking you.
From the very beginning of our monastic life at Jacob's Falls, we have seen as our special charism and apostolic work the building up of God's kingdom through the arts.
That's it. To build up the kingdom of God through the arts. What I'm going to ask you to consider doing is that if you're a parent with children, please take them to a fine arts museum. Please help them to listen to classical music. I understand that a lot of modernists now are tapping into classical music because the frequency and the vibrations are at an elevated pace, and they actually have beneficial kind of functions when you listen to classical, beautiful music like polyphony, just a concerto, an opera. That's art. This is not subjective. It might not be your taste. You might not like it, to be honest with you. Some operas are just not my thing. I mean, they put me to sleep, but others are just fascinating. But the fact is, I'd prefer that more than I'd watch someone hacking a piece of clay or putting their face up on a rotating piece of clay. This is just really the sadness. And the reason why all of this is necessary is because it will save your brain and your child's brain, but it will more importantly save you and your child's soul. So I just want you to kind of look at this little video clip here. It's quite nice. It's meditative, because that's what art allows you to do. Contemplate on the deeper things of life. And life means God.
I'm Donny McManus. I'm a sculptor from Dublin, and I've just settled here in Falls Church. I went to art school in Dublin, where I was promptly kicked out of the art department for being too figurative, representational in my art, and too Catholic. As I see, there's a crisis in our culture in the West right now, and I see the solution is to go to the core of our culture, which is Christ. My calling, I suppose my vocation as an artist is to resurrect the Christian tradition in the visual arts. Why I produce sacred art logically comes from the overflow of my interior life. So if all art is the overflow of the interior life of the artist, if my interior life is steeped in the liturgy, attending Mass daily or praying in the church daily, scriptures, the lives of the saints and so on, then that interior life will overflow in my work.
That's it. You see, the art is so connected to the interior life. And the more you immerse yourself and your family in beautiful things, it helps their minds, and it also helps their souls. And I'm going to simply close by saying that in 1999, St. John Paul ushered in a new Jubilee year, which is why I'm leading a pilgrimage now in 2025. I invite you to learn about my pilgrimage. Just simply go to platinggrace.com/travel. You can see the Jubilee trip to Italy, because it was then that the church has a reason to celebrate. And there's going to be a ton of people. I'm talking like more than tons and tons and tons of people, a lot of people, millions of people coming to Italy to kind of celebrate with the Holy Father the opening of the Great Jubilee door and ushering a time for renewal. You see, I wanted to talk about this because our world needs renewal. And St. John Paul, in the Great Millennium Jubilee, he actually wrote a letter to the artists, and he asked the question, what will save the world? And then he quoted Dostoevsky's The Idiot. And it concludes by saying, beauty. Beauty will save the world. I wanted you to contemplate a little bit from a pastoral, formative point of view. Whenever you're seeing ugliness in the world, turn off the TV, look away, and look at something beautiful. It doesn't even have to be sacred images necessarily, but just look at something that is beautiful, that's been captured by the artists. Because guess what? We are masterpieces by God. We are the clay. He is the potter. You see, we've got to pray for artists that they will actually recognize whatever talent that God has given to them and use it not to make things that look literally like feces, but to make something look like we're made in God's image and likeness. And how when God makes things, God says, it is good. Thank you for listening. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. Leave your comments. What's your favorite piece of artwork? I'll tell you about that maybe in my future episodes, but there are definitely some winners and top of my list. What's your favorite piece of artwork? And also please consider supporting us on our Patreon community so that we can not only give you great access to awesome content, but also some special perks. But your support helps us to continue to dish out faith, culture, and commentary. God bless you. Stay hungry for God.